Swinburne University of Technology.
Welcome to the brief introduction for how to write a critical review. For many of you, this will be the first time you've had to write a critical review for psychology. I recommend that you read over the assignment details, including the way in which it is assessed, its structure, format, and style. You should also spend time reading over the additional tips and general comments relating to expression, structure, and formatting. Once you have written your critical review, I strongly recommend that you compare what you have written to what we have identified in the additional tips and general comments relating to expression, structure, and formatting. When we assess the critical review, we often find that many easy marks are lost due to common mistakes, including failure to adhere to APA format. At the core of any critical review is an integrated and critical analysis of a topic. So what does a critical analysis refer to? A critical analysis involves one conducting a systematic review of the literature that is looking at what has been published and identifying the consistencies and inconsistencies across what has been found. It is also important to look at what previous research has concluded. Sometimes you will find the conclusions made are not supported by the data, and this is important to identify. When writing a critical review, don't just cite one study after another. Instead, integrate them. This may include integrating them based upon common research criterion, such as their findings or methodology. When critically reviewing research, it is important to consider how conclusions in the research have been made. Are all the findings consistent? If not, why? Is it due to the use of different cohorts or methodology? Are other factors involved, such as gender, ethnicity, cultural factors? Having said this, a critical review is not just about saying that there are differences and it's due to some small sample size, gender, or methodology. A good critical review will provide a greater depth of understanding in terms of what may explain the consistencies and inconsistencies within the literature. When conducting research, we not only try to replicate what others have found, but we also try to extend upon the findings conducted to date. Given this, I recommend that when you read over studies relating to your essay topic, you should also look at what the authors identify as being future studies. Often, these future study suggestions provide an interesting insight to what the top researchers see as areas in the literature that need to be addressed. This is another important point about writing a critical review. Not only is it about exploring evidence that is or is not in a particular topic, but it is also about trying to identify where the holes are in the literature and what has been done and what should be done. In relation to the critical review, we will provide you with a variety of topics from which you can choose. When writing your critical review, I recommend that you strongly consider the areas we have already identified that should be addressed in the topic. To help you get a better understanding of what is recommended or required in terms of a critical review, I provided you with a series of high distinction examples written by previous students. At this time, I will focus particularly on the example HD paper entitled Dissociative Identity Disorder, Real Phenomenon. The first thing that you should notice is what we asked the students to cover and how the student has identified each of these areas by subheadings. Subheadings can be a very good way to help break up sections in your critical review, yet still provide a sense of flow. As you will see in this example, the tutor has made several comments throughout the critical review. When looking at the abstract, there is a good general opening statement identifying the controversial nature of the diagnosis of socio-dissociative identity disorder. It also identifies details about the diagnostic validity and the two models in which this essay will review. Overall, the abstract provides a very good general introduction to what will be covered in the essay. The conclusion is excellent and consistent with the findings in the critical review. To improve the abstract, the author could have added a sentence at the start which identified what the focus of this critical review was. At the start of the critical review, should also consider having a scoping statement. A scoping statement identifies to the reader what the purpose of the review is and what the key areas the review will discuss. It is also important when identifying what areas you will be reviewing that this in turn is reflected in how they are placed within the critical review. Often, one of the common mistakes students writing a critical review is that they tend to stay on one study after another. As you can see in the first paragraph, the example HD paper, the student has been able to combine and cite several different key papers and identify how they are consistent with a particular view. For example, the student says, moreover, opponents of the diagnostic validity of DID have argued for a social cognitive model, suggesting that core features of DID are created iatrogenically through therapy reinforced suggestion. This is then followed by a grouping of references. This is then followed by a second sentence which also again identifies several key articles which all identify a common view that DID cannot be reliably diagnosed and is best represented as comorbidity of other disorders. The following paragraph provides an alternate view how DID is seen in the literature, specifically the trauma genetic model. At the end of this paragraph, the student provides a very good summary. Another helpful strategy is, instead of citing the diagnostic criteria in the text, place it into a table and then refer to it in the text. Throughout the rest of the critical review, you will see that the student has commonly identified the subsections in which they review material and ensure any statement they make is backed up by one or more publications. Again, it is important to identify that the student has reported and compared the key papers in this topic area and has integrated them well, identifying where there is consistency and inconsistency in terms of what has been written. You might be wondering how you identify which of the articles are key. The best way to do this is to do a literature search and see who cites who and what are the papers which have been cited the most. You might also be able to identify that the authors who are the leaders within the field tend to publish a lot and are often highly cited. You might also be wondering how you identify who are the leaders in their field. The way to do this is again looking for who's been cited a lot and how often they're cited. You should also remember that even though a paper may be highly cited, that does not necessarily mean that the study was conducted well. It will still have problems in terms of methodology or limitations or biases, and they should be identified where relevant. Within each section, the student clearly provides a good review of the literature, but also ensures at the end of each section there is a summary conclusion statement. This provides the reader with a good sense of how the student interprets the literature. The final section of the HD Critical Review example, the student provides an excellent integrated summary and conclusion section. Again, you will see multiple citations cited, integrated and compared based upon the commonalities or differences. A common question students ask is, how many references should I use? There can be no specific answer to this. However, what I would say is that it will depend upon the topic area in which you are reviewing. For example, if your review involves a very well-researched area of psychology, such as anxiety or depression, it might be that there are many more articles in which you will find and need to review. However, other topics which have less published research, such as DID, would mean that you would not be able to find as many articles and therefore be more likely to cite less articles. Again, you can have a sense of how good a published article is based upon the author and the history of publications, as well as how often the paper is cited, although of course this is influenced by when it is published. For example, papers published over the last few years will be less likely to be cited well, even though they might be very good studies and be highly cited in the future. A final comment in terms of your critical review is that after writing it, give it to a friend or colleague to read. After they read it, ask them to tell you what it was about. Can they identify what the core features of this critical review were? And did the conclusions you have to support with the research that you have reviewed? It is also important that after you have written a final draft, that you leave it for at least a few days, and then come back to it with fresh eyes. This will allow you to have some distance between what you have written and enable you to critically assess what you have written in your review. Questions you should consider include: have I addressed the recommended areas identified in the assignment handouts? Can I clearly see the subheadings referring to them? Also, ensure that you look at the additional tips and general comments relating to expression, structure, and formatting to provide you more guidance as to how to write and finalise your essay. Remember, many easy marks are lost due to not following these recommendations. I wish you all the best with writing your critical review.